Our next speaker, our next panelist is Rosemary Feal, who's the Executive Director of the Modern Language Association, MLA, which is the international scholarly society with more than 30,000 members that supports one of the most distinguished publishing programs in the humanities. Her responsibilities at the MLA include being the general editor of MLA publications, including Profession and the MLA newsletter, and chairing the program committee for the annual convention. Rosemary went to the MLA in 2002 from the State University of New York, Buffalo, where she was a professor of Spanish and chair of the Department of Modern Languages and Literatures, from where she's now on leave. She is a member and former vice president of the board of directors of the National Humanities Alliance, and she also served on the board of directors of the American Council of Learned Societies and is a co-convener of the Coalition of the Academic Workforce. Rosemary has published in the fields of contemporary Latin American literature, Afro-Hispanic studies, feminist theory, and psychoanalytic criticism. Her book publications include Painting on the Page, Interartistic Approaches to Modern Hispanic Texts, Novel Lives, the fictional autobiographies of Guillermo Cabrera Infante and Mario Vargas Llosa, and Isabel Allende Today. Rosemary, you have la parole. And just be sure to be close to the microphone. Thanks.
Thank you. Is this audible? Yes. Thank you, Shani. I'm really glad to be here. Even though Spanish is, in fact, my field, I did an undergraduate bachelor's degree in French, so I feel I have some street cred in the Why French Matters, as well as representing all the languages that the Modern Language Association teaches. We don't take the subway in New York. We have Metro cards.
That's an improvement.
But
that's an improvement.
We take the train. And I don't know that we aspire to be Paris. Maybe the Upper East Side does. Buenos Aires, maybe, or maybe Buenos Aires aspires to be us. In any event, let me start with an anecdote. A few years ago, a woman in an upstate town in New York won several $1 million in the New York State Lottery. And she was interviewed for a local radio program and asked what she was going to do with the money. Well, she said, I would pay off the mortgage and pay her son's mortgage, make repairs to their houses, buy new cars for herself, her husband, her son's family, put some money away for her granddaughter's education, and her husband would probably stop working. All these projects still left a sizable number of millions for other endeavors. So, would she want to travel, asked the radio interviewer. No, she answered. Had she been to New York City, he asked. No, she answered. Wouldn't she like to visit the city, asked the interviewer. What for? She replied. This was followed by a lengthy silence before the conversation started up again. The interviewer thanked the woman for her participation on his radio program and put a prompt end to the call. So how does one comment on the what for? Was the woman's remark the reflection of unfathomable ignorance? Was it fear of the unknown? Was it denial of the possible pleasure or the application of some utilitarian principle? For the interviewer, wanting to visit New York seemed natural, and the woman's disregard for the great metropolis left him dumbstruck, perhaps because it put into question his own desires, wishes, and values, all unquantifiable emotions. Even though he and the lottery winner spoke the same language, the clash of cultures led to a momentary suspension of communication. Explaining why French matters can render one speechless, as did the what for of the upstate New York lottery winner. You could, of course, become quite loquacious if you were to list the many world-changing historical events, sociological innovations, intellectual and cultural accomplishments, the artistic endeavors, the scientific discoveries, and medical breakthroughs that can be attributed to France and French speakers. And indeed, I could go down a long list, but they'd be very familiar, I imagine, to the people in the room and the 50-some watching remotely. Until the 20th century, French was the intellectual, diplomatic, and artistic lingua franca of most advanced countries, as we just heard. French is embedded in the linguistic fabric of English, and French is implanted in the American social landscape from Maine to Louisiana. So where is French in the United States today? I'm happy to report that in American colleges and universities, French continues to be the most studied language after Spanish. Between 2002 and 2006, enrollments in French grew by 2.2%, and from 2006 to 2009, French jumped ahead by 4.8%. So you hear French enrollments are down, but in fact, on a nation level, the number of enrollments in French have increased in the proportions I just gave you. The study of languages other than English is actively pursued by American students. Between 2006 and 2009, enrollments in language study rose by 6.6% on American campuses. There were approximately 1,400,000 enrollments in languages other than English in fall 2009. And French is still a widely spoken language, first language, in the United States. If you go to the MLA language map, which you can see on our homepage, you can find the number of speakers of French according to the U.S. Census in every state. You can look at it by zip code or by county. And what you'll find, interestingly, is obviously you know what states are going to have a great number of speakers of French. Those will be the states, Louisiana, states bordering on our neighbor to the north, where French is the co-language of the country, official language. But in the United States, there are approximately 1,325,000 speakers of French in the home as a first language. About 1 in 5 people whom the census tracks speaks a language other than English in the home. This doesn't tell us whether it's their native language, although in most cases it probably is. So one thing to remember when we ask why French matters is it's an important first language in the United States. In addition, you can see when you go to the language map the percentage of children who speak French, which gives you an idea of the upcoming generations who will continue to have French as a heritage or a family language. Now, those are some pieces of good news, but there are also some issues that I need to bring to your attention, which we might classify as not so good news. Even though French is the number 2 language studied on U.S. campuses, Spanish takes up about 50% of the enrollments in languages other than English. French comes in second, but at about 14%. So for those of us who wish there were more students in languages other than Spanish, I know, are there any Hispanistas in the room? I usually get a little humiliation for that. But even as a Hispanist, I believe that our strength is in the diversity of the languages we study. There's also been a drop in high school studies, and this is most alarming for those of us who deal with language education at the post-secondary level. The American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages tracks enrollment in secondary, actually K through 12, and they released a report on enrollments in 2007-8. And French takes up 14% of enrollments in high school, but Spanish takes up 72%. And I've heard it cited that the students who actually come to college, who get admitted to college, have closer to 90% of Spanish as their language. So you're not, if you are professors of French at the college level, you're not getting the number of students ready to take your intermediate advanced classes and your culture, history, film classes, literature classes in the language. So we've seen then a decrease in French enrollments in high school of about 3.2% from between their 2 surveys, 2004-5 and 2007-8. I think this is important to remember for those of you as well who can advocate for language study at the K through 12 level. We need to keep a diversity of languages strong at that level. Americans are, of course, notoriously monolingual. You all know the joke about what do you call a person who speaks 3 languages and so on. It's also, the United States is also called a language cemetery because it's here where the world...
What's the joke?
Oh, really? How many have never heard the joke?
No.
Oh, my God. I've been indoors far too long. What do you call a person who speaks 3 languages? Trilingual. What do you call a person who speaks 2 languages? Bilingual. What do you call a person who speaks 1 language?
American.
There you
Thank
are.
you.
Except 1 in 5 Americans
Don't actually.
don't actually classify as monolingual. Language learning, as we know, is not a core requirement in the American system of education, and yet in most industrialized countries, language learning is compulsory, starting in elementary school. The European Union considers language to be inherent to the human species and protects heritage languages as a human right. Educated Europeans are expected to know their local or heritage language, the national language or languages, and one other international language. In 2010, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has found U.S. high school students age 15 are outperformed in reading ability by their peers in Hong Kong, Singapore, Canada, as well as those in Shanghai, China, South Korea, and Finland. The mediocre scores reached by U.S. students in reading literacy have been lamented year after year by secretaries of education and presidential commissions, and yet there is currently no national coordinated effort to focus resources on expanding language education at the K-12 level. And we know that knowing more than one language increases your literacy and your abilities, cognitive abilities, both in your first language and in fact changes your brain structure. At heart, French matters because all languages matter. They enrich our cultural, scientific, and artistic knowledge. They surprise us. They invade our comfort zone. And most importantly, they question us, and in so doing reveal the small space occupied by our own sphere of knowledge. Remember the anecdote? The interviewer's silence at the "what for" was perhaps due to his sudden realization that New York City was beyond the horizon or the reach of the lottery winner's needs, interests, or desires. Maybe he knew he was projecting his curiosity and interest onto the woman he was interviewing. His reaching out to her interpolated him in return. To learn a language is to risk being interpolated, to lose one's self-assurance, but it is also to know the thrill of discovery, the excitement of experiencing something new, the joyful satisfaction of attainment. All of these emotions and the critical thinking that arise from the shock of cultures inform us about the others and ourselves. That's their far-reaching utility. Then, after all, the competent use of a foreign language for professional endeavors is something like a high return on a long investment, even in the basement of a bank in France. C'est dû en plus, the French might say. Thank you.